Happy week 5, everyone. So now we are really beginning to design the research project. Now that we have done our annotated bibliography, we have started to be in conversation with other argumentative articles that relate to our topic. Maybe we're beginning to shape our own series of questions and certainly the way that we're going to be addressing those questions. And so this week, we are working to figure out a way to construct our argument. And I want us to be thinking about that in a way that isn't necessarily relegated to the age old outline that we've had to do in the past. As we know, many of us in this class are free writers, where it's really through the writing of the first draft that we truly discover what it is that we're trying to argue. And so I feel like an extensive outline tends to restrict students from making discoveries when they write one prior to writing a rough draft. However, obviously, coming up with a structure or coming up with some kind of physical representation of the ideation that you're developing is a good thing, as long as it serves as a developmental tool rather than something that you need to very rigidly adhere to. Instead, it just becomes kind of an inspiration for shaping where you want to go. So this week is kind of toying around with that idea of the visualization of an argument. So thinking about it more as a design rather than as this kind of rigid outline. And so the main assignment for this week is an argumentative visualization. And I wanted to just kind of contextualize this a little bit. You can obviously see the assignment in Camino, and it's due at the end of the week. And we are going to utilize that argumentative visualization as a foundation for the discussion that we have in our one-on-one conferences next week, which is what next week is going to be comprised of entirely. But the argument visualization, as I say here, the goal is to examine whether your sources are addressing all of the different aspects of your research, where you might need to think about finding more research, and also thinking about a way to organize or make progressive your argument. So you are to create a visual representation of your argument in a way that helps determine the functionality of whatever it is that you're coming up with. So you want this argumentative visualization to somehow represent the main ideas that you think you're going to be covering in your draft, and also trying to see where your research sources would go in that kind of design for the draft. Okay. And in the assignment prompt, I have an organizational format as inspiration, but certainly is not requisite to what you need to do. But of course, it includes the ideas that we have covered in this class last quarter and parts of this quarter. An introduction, context, your main argumentative points, and the conclusion. And somehow thinking about those things in relation to one another and what that kind of looks like. Yeah? This argument visualization needs to be thought of, again, as a design, something that could inspire you as you begin writing your rough draft, but nothing that is so rigid that you can't deviate from it in the moments of writing discovery. Okay? You can think of it kind of like an artwork that is making an argument if you want to, because literally that's what it's asking you to do, is to visualize the argument that you're making. So It can be a creative design choice. It can be images. It can be phrases. I mean, this can be in a PowerPoint if you want it to be, or a Prezi, but it also could be in a map format. It could be in a 3D sculpture. It could be a performance art piece. It could be an infographic. And there are many, many ways that you can do this, but most importantly is that you're utilizing the opportunity of this argument visualization to conceive of the way you see your progressive argument being. We think first in terms of images, and so to be able to kind of synthesize your natural design ability with your language and ideation is what we're trying to do here. Okay? So the way to prepare us for this assignment, I have a whole bunch of examples that previous students have done, and they cover the gamut. One is a video, one is literally a map, some are like PowerPoints, others are drawings. I mean, there are many ways that someone could approach this argument visualization. The goal here is not to adhere to some kind of requirements on my side. It is to create something that you feel is serving to help you kind of imagine the direction you want your argument to go and how you can go about getting there. Okay? So you have that visualization, and then you also want to use it as a way to understand where you can plug in your source material. That's the goal. How you go about doing that is entirely creative. I am not making specific guidelines for this, other than the inclusion of information. Because essay writing is creative. You will not have a professor going, you must be 4 pages and it must have 12 sources and it must, have an intro paragraph that has a thesis and you must have 12 paragraphs in there and it must utilize, these concepts and terms. That's not going to exist past college. And in fact, if you're in a good class, it shouldn't exist at all. But of course, the world works the way it does. What we're trying to do is make you independent thinkers when it comes to presenting your arguments, especially in the essayistic form. And so this is a chance for you to really play with form and structure in a way that you think is most evoking the argument that you want to make or that you think you want to make in your research paper. Okay? Remember, we're not beholden to anything until we turn in that final, right? It is a constant revisioning, reimagining of ideas. But this, of course, is a way to get us to the next step. Because once I see that visualization, I can then talk to you about the shape of your argument in next week's one-on-one conferences. Okay? So for this week, the reading is kind of light because I really want you to be thinking about this. And for Thursday's class, I am asking you to read an essay called Inside Exopolis, Scenes from Orange County. And it's by one of my favorite academics, Edward Soja. And in this article, he has a very interesting way of designing his argument. And so I'm asking you to start practicing this idea of argument visualization. So for the discussion question that is due this week, after you read Inside Exopolis, I'd like you to attempt to visualize the article's argument, and you're going to be presenting it to class, meaning that you're going to come up with some kind of image that exemplifies how you are reading the progression of this argument. The questions I ask you for that are, what does the shape of the argument look like? Give it a shape. We do this by nature. So it's really about you being in touch with how you imagine the argument being made. I'm pushing you for this. For some, it might be a lot more challenging than others, just because you might not be someone who thinks in terms of design, or you don't allow yourself to think in terms of design. I should put it that way. But you, in this visualization, you want to come up with the shape. You want to identify the main points. You want us to see a progression, so where it leads. And that you also want to think about who the intended audience is and how that might also depict the design of the argument. And for this, just like the formal assignment, in this discussion question, you can also use any visual element. It can be a doodle, it can be a drawing, it can be an infographic, a series of slides, whatever you think encapsulates what you find to be the shape of that argument. Okay, so we're going to be practicing this. We're going to be posting that on Thursday, and then everyone is going to respond to at least 3 of your colleagues by Friday. And hopefully, by looking at all the different ways that all of you have applied a visualization to an essay that you read, you might be inspired to come up with strategies for your own visualization. Okay? That is what we're working on this week. Then, just to remind you, we are having one-on-one conferences next week where we talk about where you're going with your research project, who you are attempting to interview for your research project. Maybe I can help you with that as well. So there is a sign-up sheet for the one-on-ones. And please sign up by the end of the day on Friday. And then we get started. Next week we'll chat in lieu of having class. Or in lieu of having our kind of formal lecture moments. You're going to be focusing on constructing the first draft of your paper. And so I'll be working with you on a one-on-one basis to kind of particularize any questions that you have, challenges, where you want to go with this. We can kind of brainstorm off each other and just have a little bit of connection, right? So this is what we're doing. Enjoy the readings. If you have any questions, please contact me. Otherwise, I'll see you soon.